In the autumn of 1988, a 38-year-old archaeologist named Nick Bateman stood at the bottom of a muddy excavation pit in the heart of the City of London, staring at something that should not have existed. The wall before him was Roman. That much was certain. Kentish ragstone, mortared in the distinctive fashion of the 1st century. But the wall was curved, and in Roman archaeology, a curved wall meant only one thing. Bateman had been directing what was supposed to be a routine dig beneath Guildhall yard, clearing the site for a new art gallery. The Museum of London had assigned him to document whatever medieval and Victorian debris might be found before construction could begin. Nobody expected anything significant. The area had been excavated before. In the late 1960s, archaeologists had dug directly through this very spot while searching for remnants of the old Roman fort, and they had found nothing remarkable. The amphitheatre of Roman London, the entertainment venue that every major Roman city possessed, had eluded researchers for over a century. Most scholars assumed it lay somewhere else entirely, perhaps under the Tower of London, perhaps beneath the sprawl of the modern financial district. The blank space on every reconstruction map of Roman Londinium had become an embarrassment. Now Bateman was looking at that blank space made stone. He sent word to Hugh Chapman, the museum's Roman specialist. Chapman arrived within the hour, descended into the pit, and examined the curving wall in silence. Neither man spoke the word aloud. Neither needed to. After 100 years of searching, after generations of archaeologists had walked directly over this ground without knowing what lay beneath their feet, the amphitheatre had finally revealed itself not through deliberate excavation, but through the accident of urban redevelopment. It was a discovery that would reshape everything historians understood about the capital's Roman past. To understand what Bateman had found, one must first understand the city that built it. In the year 70 AD, Londinium was a settlement defined by trauma. Less than a decade earlier, the Iceni queen Boudica had led a devastating revolt against Roman occupation. Her forces had swept through the young trading post and burned it to the ground. Archaeological cores taken from beneath modern London still reveal a distinct red layer of scorched earth, the cremated remains of the first Roman city compressed into a geological scar. Thousands perished. The survivors fled. For a time, Londinium ceased to exist, but Rome did not abandon its prize. The empire rebuilt, and rebuilt aggressively. Within a generation, the charred ruins had transformed into a proper provincial capital. Warehouses lined the Thames. A wooden bridge spanned the river. A forum and basilica rose at the city's commercial heart. And on the northwestern edge of the settlement, where the ground sloped toward the marshy floodplain of the Walbrook stream, Roman engineers began constructing the building that would define civic life for the next 3 centuries, an amphitheatre. The site was marginal land, too waterlogged for housing, prone to flooding, useful only for industrial purposes. But the Romans understood that marginal ground could be transformed. They dug an oval depression into the earth, approximately 100 meters long and 85 meters wide. They raised earthen banks around the perimeter and covered them with tiered wooden benches. They lined drainage channels with timber planks to carry away rainwater and blood. Over 1,000 individual timbers went into the structure's first phase alone. When completed around 74 or 75 AD, the same year construction began on Rome's Great Colosseum, the London amphitheatre could hold between 6,000 and 7,000 spectators. In a city whose total population barely exceeded 20,000, this meant that a quarter of all Londinium could gather in a single place to watch a single spectacle. And the spectacles were precisely what Rome intended. The amphitheatre served multiple purposes, all of them political. Gladiatorial combat by expensive professionals who toured the empire was likely rare, reserved for special occasions when a wealthy patron could afford to sponsor games. But animal hunts occurred with greater frequency. Wolves and bears captured from Britain's forests were released into the arena to be chased and slain before cheering crowds. public executions transformed justice into entertainment, reminding every citizen of the consequences of defying Roman authority. Religious ceremonies honored the emperor as a living god. Military drills displayed the discipline of the legions. The amphitheatre was not merely a venue, it was a machine for manufacturing loyalty. For the ordinary residents of Londinium, the merchants, the labourers, the enslaved workers who loaded cargo at the docks and hauled water through the streets, the amphitheatre offered something else entirely. It offered escape. Admission was free. On days when games were held, the normal hierarchies of the city momentarily dissolved. A freed slave could sit near a wealthy trader. A dock worker could cheer alongside a centurion. The curved walls and tiered seating created an acoustic intimacy that amplified every roar of the crowd, every clash of weapons, every agonized cry from the arena floor. The sand, the Latin word for which, arena, gives us the English word arena, absorbed what needed absorbing. And when the spectacle ended, the citizens returned to their cramped apartments and endless labours, having been reminded that they were part of something vast and powerful and eternal. This illusion lasted approximately 300 years. By the early 4th century, the Roman Empire was fracturing. Britain became a backwater, too expensive to defend, too distant to prioritize. Around 410 AD, the last legions withdrew. The cities they left behind, including Londinium, collapsed into ruin. The amphitheatre, no longer maintained, began to crumple. Stone robbers stripped the dressed masonry for reuse in other buildings, the wooden seating rotted, and the drainage channels silted over. And then, something remarkable happened. The abandoned structure disappeared. Layers of what archaeologists call dark earth, organic soil, accumulated during centuries of urban abandonment and buried the amphitheatre beneath several meters of decomposed vegetation and debris. The curved walls that had once echoed with the screams of dying animals and condemned criminals fell silent beneath a blanket of forgotten time. When Saxon settlers eventually reoccupied the old Roman city in the 10th and 11th centuries, they had no idea what lay beneath their feet. They built timber houses directly atop the buried arena. They established streets that unknowingly curved around its hidden perimeter. And then, in the 12th century, they built the Guildhall. The medieval Guildhall, the seat of London's civic government, the headquarters of its powerful guilds, and the symbolic heart of commercial power in the emerging metropolis, was constructed directly above the amphitheatre's imposing north stand. This was almost certainly not coincidental. Medieval builders frequently incorporated visible Roman ruins into new structures, both to save labour and to claim the legitimacy of ancient authority. The massive stone walls of the amphitheatre, still protruding from the ground in the 1100s, would have been too substantial to ignore. The Guildhall's architects likely built upon them deliberately, anchoring medieval power to Roman foundations without fully understanding what those foundations had once contained. A 13th century gatehouse was positioned precisely over the amphitheatre's southern entrance. The street plan of the surrounding ward followed the buried ellipse, as if guided by an invisible hand. For 800 more years, the centre of London's government rested upon the centre of Roman entertainment, and no one knew. The rediscovery in 1988 presented the City of London Corporation with an unprecedented dilemma. The new Guildhall Art Gallery had already been designed. Foundations had been planned. Contracts had been signed. Construction was scheduled to begin within months. And now, directly beneath the building site, lay one of the most significant archaeological finds in British history. A scheduled ancient monument that could not legally be destroyed, that would require preservation in perpetuity, and that would transform every assumption about the gallery's architecture and budget. The corporation made a decision that was both radical and simple. They would redesign the entire building around the ruins. Architect Richard Gilbert Scott was commissioned to create a structure that incorporated the amphitheatre in situ. The gallery would include a purpose-built underground chamber, climate-controlled, to prevent further deterioration, where visitors could descend 6 meters beneath street level to walk among the Roman walls. The ancient stones would need to be suspended during construction, protected from vibration and moisture, and maintained at constant temperature and humidity for the indefinite future. Gilbert Scott later remarked that the retention of the Roman masonry made them the most expensive stones in Britain. The excavation that followed was the largest and most complex archaeological project in the City of London's history. From 1987 through 1996, teams from the Museum of London Archaeology Service documented over 20,000 individual archaeological contexts. They uncovered the full eastern entrance tunnel, still framed by its original Kentish ragstone gateway. They found 2 small chambers flanking the arena, possibly animal pens, possibly shrines, that suggested the kinds of spectacles once staged within. They discovered wooden thresholds and plank-lined drainage channels, preserved for nearly 2,000 years by the same waterlogged conditions that had made the land unsuitable for Roman housing. The timber preservation was described as stunning. Among the most evocative finds were lead curse tablets, thin-rolled sheets inscribed with magical spells, tucked into the drains and scattered across the arena floor. These were prayers to dark forces, imploring them to crush the opponent of one's favored champion. Samian pottery, decorated with gladiatorial motifs, emerged from the soil, likely sold as souvenirs to spectators waiting for the games to begin. Bone gaming counters appeared in clusters, dropped by bored audience members passing time between bouts. Fragments of green and purple marble imported from Greece and Egypt revealed the surprising luxury of the arena's decorative scheme during its early 2nd century renovation, possibly commissioned to coincide with Emperor Hadrian's visit to London in 122 AD. The sand itself remained. After 19 centuries, patches of the original arena floor still held the granular surface that had once absorbed gladiators' blood. The Guildhall Art Gallery opened in August 1999, inaugurated by Queen Elizabeth II in a ceremony that connected modern Britain to its Roman origins. The amphitheatre display followed in 2002, making the ruins accessible to the public for the first time since the fall of Rome. But the story does not end with triumph. The site that Bateman uncovered represents only a fraction of the original amphitheatre. The eastern entrance and a portion of the arena wall are visible. The rest remains buried beneath surrounding buildings and beyond the reach of excavation. The full ellipse has never been exposed. Visitors descend into a controlled environment chamber to see what survives, including atmospheric lighting, digital projections, and intermittent crowd noise that conjure the ghosts of spectacles long concluded. Visitors must imagine the rest. What they walk upon is not merely ancient masonry. It is a palimpsest. The amphitheatre's relationship to the Guildhall above embodies something essential about London: the way the present rests upon the past without acknowledging it, the way power gravitates toward the same locations across millennia, the way a city forgets and remembers and forgets again. Nick Bateman speculated that the Guildhall may have been deliberately located to incorporate surviving Roman stonework. If true, then the medieval guilds who gathered to govern London's commerce did so while sitting atop the very seats where Roman audiences once cheered for blood. The irony would have been lost on them. The connection would have been invisible. It remains largely invisible today. A ring of dark paving stones set into Guildhall Yard traces the amphitheatre's perimeter at street level. Most pedestrians cross it without glancing down. The office workers who hurry through the square on their lunch breaks, the tourists who photograph the medieval Great Hall, the bureaucrats who attend meetings in the corporation's chambers, few pause to consider that they are walking over a 2,000-year-old arena. The Roman past lies 6 meters beneath their feet, sealed in its climate-controlled cocoon, waiting. Admission to the amphitheatre is free, as it was in Roman times. Approximately 50,000 visitors descend each year to see what remains. They stand where gladiators once stood. They look up at walls that once echoed with the roar of 7,000 voices. They read the curse tablets, study the souvenirs, and try to imagine what it meant to live in a city where entertainment and execution were indistinguishable, where loyalty was manufactured through spectacle, where the sand absorbed everything. The new London Museum, scheduled to open in late 2026 at a cost of £437 million, will feature extensive Roman collections in underground vaults constructed at the original Roman street level. The amphitheatre will remain in place, connected to the broader story of Londinium through exhibition and interpretation. The most expensive stones in Britain will continue to anchor the most powerful square mile in Europe. Nick Bateman went on to author the definitive publications on the excavation. Academic reviewers called his work a major contribution not only to London archaeology, but to amphitheatre studies internationally. The discovery he made in 1988, the curved wall that should not have existed, resolved a mystery that had vexed researchers for over a century. And yet, mysteries remain. The Walbrook skulls, hundreds of Roman-era craniums recovered from the stream that once flowed past the amphitheatre, many showing signs of violent trauma, have never been definitively explained. Some researchers speculate they are the remains of those executed in the arena, disposed of in the convenient waterway. Others propose different origins entirely. The skulls keep their silence. So does the amphitheatre in its way. The Romans built this structure to demonstrate power, to manufacture consent, to transform a traumatized population into loyal subjects through the shared experience of spectacle. The medieval authorities built the Guildhall upon its ruins to claim that power for themselves. The modern city corporation preserved the remains to demonstrate civic stewardship and cultural continuity. Each generation has used this ground for its own purposes, layering meaning upon meaning until the original intent becomes impossible to recover. What survives is stone. What survives is sand. What survives is the shape of a gathering place, carved into the earth and maintained across 2 millennia by successive powers who understood instinctively that this location mattered. The amphitheatre that hid in plain sight for 1,500 years is hiding no longer. 19 centuries on, people still gather where Romans gathered, 6 meters beneath the same sky.